This is a special episode of InDev in response to the Archie Texturing mini competition on TWHL, in which I provided a base untextured map and the entrants had to texture it. Now, I quite specifically said when I made this competition I wanted to see textures specifically to fit brushwork, and none of you did it. Really? I mean, there were tiles and stuff, but nothing that really stuck out and fitted the brushwork. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that you don't know that technique. So I'm going to show it to you as best I can in Photoshop. So this is a stair texture I made for the core, and it might not look particularly special, but it has an interesting characteristic. Here's the front of it. I'll show them both at the same size. Has an interesting characteristic in that it is designed specifically to fit brushwork. Now if we go into our map and take a look at it, you will see, excuse the notes, it fits the brushwork. And stairs are a very quick example, but the point is I didn't have to align these or anything, they are just designed specifically for it. Exactly 0.5 scale, which you'll notice is the same as every single one of my textures for shadow consistency in the Goldsource engine. Point is, they fit without needing to be fitted. How do you do that? What you do is you go into Photoshop and you go Edit, Preferences, Guides, Grid and Slices, and you set your grid line. For Goldsource I normally use every 32 pixels, and subdivisions either 4 or 8 usually. When you get your grid, which you can get by going View, Show Grid, or the way you'll get used to doing it, Control and Apostrophe, and there's your grid. Now you might notice, I'm just going to quickly go into RGB mode so I can adjust this. You might notice if I darken it, the edges of my steps are perfectly aligned with these grid lines every 32 lines. So every 32 pixels there's a solid grid line, and every 8 pixels there's a dotted grid line. So every solid one, which I know because I set up my grid is every 32 pixels, translates into Hammer as 16 units. Now I know this is just sounding silly, but if you think about it, the scale I'm using in Hammer is 0.5, which is a half. So half of 32 is 16, and the steps are 16 units deep. So from there to there is 16 units, half of 32, there you go. And the vertical is 8, so exactly the same on the other texture. Sorry, I'll just close that. If I put on the grid, every 16 pixels, so every 2 grid lines, and half of 16 is 8, so they fit perfectly without needing to be fitted. Now stairs are just a very quick example of the easiest way I could show it, but you can actually start doing fairly interesting things with your brushwork and with your textures, because if I put the grid on this, you'll notice that the border of the door is perfectly aligned with the grid, which means in Hammer you can very easily, without having to fit anything, create your door frame, and it's all one texture. It saves texture memory, and it's very neat. And it can be applied to double doors as well very easily. And then when you start getting a little more experienced at it, you can start doing a lot more complicated ones. For example, here's a power generator or something. For this I used a smaller grid size, so Preferences, Guides, Grid and Slices, and I changed that to 8, sorry not 5, 8. And that is the equivalent of a grid line every 4 Hammer units, so that's getting quite small scale. But you'll notice that these details, like over here and over here and all these lines down here, are fitted to the grid, and that means when we go back into Hammer, it fits the brushwork pretty sweetly. And again, it doesn't need to be aligned is the point, it just fits the brushwork. Now these boxes are made of two textures, so there's one texture for the front and one texture for the side. And if I show you the side one, the only part of it that is actually the side is this bit here, that border there. And you'll notice that I have one on either side, and that means I have variety, so that either side of the machine has a slightly different texture. It also gives me this space in the middle, which I used for textures for these power boxes at the side and in the middle. Again, that saves texture memory and just makes your life a whole lot easier when you're mapping. Okay, I'm going to close that. You shouldn't be seeing that anyway, that's secret behind the scenes stuff. So this is the base map that our contestants were challenged with. And what I'm going to do is texture this nice curved structure at the bottom that's supporting this bridge. And what every single member, without fail, did was, well, pretty much within reason, they took a big concrete texture that tiles nicely, and they went, but, and that was it. But I'm sorry, no, that's not good enough. What you need to do is make your textures to fit your brushwork. So the first thing you do is you measure the space. So what we want is from this brush to this brush. Okay, that's our distance. You can get the top as well. Then look down at the bottom right where it has your dimensions, and you'll see that's 256 units. So from there to there, 256 units. Now, because we're working in a 0.5 scale, remember, what's that going to be in Photoshop? It's going to be 512. So let's do that now. Photoshop, File, New, 512. Okay. And back in Hammer, we're going to work out the height. So you select your brush that goes from the top to the bottom, and it's 112. So in Photoshop, that's going to be 224. Resolution 72. And a white background, and there we go. So what this canvas size represents from your top left to your top right is from your top right to your top left. That is this rectangle, perfectly fitted. The challenge comes from this hole in the middle. So the way we're going to do that is measure out each individual block. So this one on the edge here is 16 units by 112. So it's going to be 32 by 224. And a very easy way to check that is if you highlight what you think it's going to be. So I'm fairly sure it's going to be that. We know that our grid is 32. So every solid grid line is 32. So there you go, that solid grid is 32, and we know the height already is 224. So boom, there we have that. Let's do the same on the other side, because we know that's there. Go back into Hammer. So that's these two brushes are highlighted in Photoshop. So then once you've got those two, we're going to grab this and this, these two brushes here. So that's 16 by 16, and that's 16 by 32. So that's going to be 32 by 64, and that's going to be 32 by 32. Again, maybe for this tutorial I should be working in 1:1 scale, but it's kind of good to know how to work when you're working to 0.5 scale, because that's kind of gold source standard these days. So there's our 64 by 32 and 32 by 32. So the next thing we can see in Hammer is that the bottom right hand corner of this block here is connected by a perfectly straight line to the bottom left hand corner of this square here. So we're going to do that in Photoshop with the polygonal lasso tool. Holding down Shift, you click your bottom right hand corner of that one, you click your bottom left hand corner of that one, and you complete the lasso. There that is. And then at the bottom, you've got the same thing again. You've got your 32 by 16 there, and your 16 by 16 there. So we're going to do exactly the same at the bottom in Photoshop. Right, now that you have your polygonal lasso, it has created this nice outline. I've also used the rectangular marquee tool. What you want to do is press Ctrl C and Ctrl V, and that's pasting what you've just done. I'm going to invert it so you can see it. So there's that shape with this hole in the middle. And this is where it gets trickier, because the hole then has these beveled edges. which are 4 brushes. Sorry, trying to find it in 2DV. There we are. And you can see if I go down to the smallest grid size, unfortunately we're going to have to do the same thing in Photoshop and go down to the smallest grid size now, because we're working to the power of halves, which is an incorrect mathematical term. Subdivisions will be half of 32, which is 16, and that means that the grid is now set up to a 1 unit grid size. So 1 square in this equals 1 unit in Hammer. So this is kind of just manual labour. There are faster cheats to do this, but basically, essentially what you're doing is going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 down. So from the edge, 7 across, 1 down. So back in Photoshop, I'm going to find the same place, which is over here. And with the polygonal lasso tool, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 down. And select that. And then we're going to go back to Hammer. And the next one down is 4 units from that corner, which is nice and easy. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's there, and that connects with the edge there. Okay. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 there. And there's our corner. So again, I'm going to create a new layer and just fill that in black, or grey apparently, black. You can see coming out. Okay, so the next thing is we're going to duplicate that, and with the grid on, just slot that into place there. And you can duplicate both of these, transform and flip, and again grid on, just popping them into place. And there you have it. That is our shape in Hammer now in Photoshop. And what I would do now is merge these layers, so you've got a single shape and this hole in the middle. But that's not a texture. That's not a texture yet. So what we need to do now is go to our web browser, and you can take all your own reference images if you want. For ease, I'm going to use CG Textures, which is a magnificent source. And I like, yeah, let's use this one. It's a nice gritty texture. Open it in Photoshop. And the first thing we need to do is make it tile. So I'm going to take a square of it. That's a square there. And paste it in. And resizing, totally up to you. However you want to do it is fine. So now we have this single rectangle of concrete. So what we do is we select that layer, filter, other, offset, and it's going to be 256 horizontal, which is half of our image size, and then half of our image size vertical as well. So the image is 512 by 224, so this offset is going to be 256 by 112. And what that does is it puts this seam in the middle, so the edge of your texture is now the middle of your texture, which means the edges at the moment seam perfectly, and you've got this ugly bit in the middle. But with that ugly bit in the middle, you can now use the spot healing brush, which I believe was introduced in CS5, and like fucking magic, there it goes. It's witchcraft. I mean, obviously you're going to spend a lot more time on this. I'm just doing it quickly for the video. But the point is, that is now a perfectly texture. So we can set that to overlay or soft light or whatever, it doesn't really matter. And let's make our background grey, and let's make this grey as well. You can select this hole in the middle, which is still there, even though it's all the same colour, you've still got your separate layer. Select the background and copy this shape and put it as the top layer, bevel it and set it to emboss down, and that gives us that nice effect of the brushwork shape. I'm just going to set the opacity of the dark one further down so that it's a little more subtle. And then what I would do just to finish this off is choose a nice rough brush, create a new layer, and just not taking too much time at all over this. It's really just a very quick, natural and rough scratching and eroding of the rock. You want to match those two up at the top corners, so that it'll still tile horizontally. And then you can set that to soft light or overlay, whatever you feels best. Yeah, I like that. That's soft light. And that is pretty much it. So if I flatten that image and set it to index color so that Wally doesn't mess with it, I'm going to save it. Yeah, let's just put it in here for the moment. So we're going to call this Compocrete. Save and close Photoshop. I'm going to assume that if you're working with Source or anything, you know how to do this sort of thing. That's not what this tutorial's supposed to be teaching you. And let's save the WAD. Close Wally, close that. Open Hammer again. Open the map again. And if we go to our brushwork, select the faces. Okay, so that's all the faces selected that we just made a texture for. Hit Browse and Compo. And there's our texture. So select that, apply it. You can see it's already at 0.50 scale, and you can just go treat as 1, left, top. You can see it's facing the wrong way, so you just put a minus in on the X. That'll flip it around. And there you have it. Fits perfectly with the brushwork. You've got that little bevel and scratchiness on the inside, and if you were to do another one on here with another scratch along the edges, that'd be a really nice 3D effect. And I'm just going to get rid of the minus here because this will fit the other way. Oops. And it is as easy as applying it to all the other brushes. And again, don't have to use any weird scales or anything, it's perfect 0.5. And there you go. So that's really what I was wanting to see in the competition. Little disappointed that I didn't. So yeah, I hope you learned something, and I look forward to seeing your maps. Cool. While I'm here, you should all go to moddb.com and head on over to the core, and then there's a lovely button down here somewhere, and you can hit watch this mod, and you should do that because you're lovely people. Thank you.